Hi, welcome to Mark in a Minute. Gosh, summer's about gone. I really enjoyed this summer. I think I enjoy all summers. So Bessent is such a badass. I remember in his congressional hearing, he was asked a question by Tillis, did you really threaten to punch Bill Pulte in the nose or in the face? And he said, no, what I said was I was going to kick his ass. So Bessent has a big bazooka, and he's going to bring that 10-year Treasury yield down and the 30-year yield down. I think ultimately it's going to be really positive for the economy in time. So we're going to handicap NVIDIA and Marvell. So NVIDIA reports on Wednesday, Marvell on Thursday, two very big reports. Moderna had huge news last week. We haven't seen the data. I want to see what the data looks like. But we think Moderna and Grail are going to fit really well together. And you know what? If I was Merck with Keytruda coming off patent, and I was going to lose maybe as much as 30 billion in sales when that goes off a patent in 2028, I would maybe think about buying these two companies. Disclosures, please read through this at your convenience. Remember, this is only educational. We're not soliciting or offering any securities purchases here. Nothing on this site should be interpreted to state or imply past performance is an indication of future results. All investments have risk, not guaranteed. Okay, so market update. Bessent announced last week he was going to do the twist. Remember, Yellen did this in 2024. So the window opens on September 9th. We mentioned this last week, and we said, no, there's more to it than buying instead of 2 billion back to do 4 billion. There's more to it. So what they're doing is he announced that they're going to shrink the supply on off the run 10-year to 30-year Treasury bonds. But they're going to do more than that. So I knew this was coming at some point. So Bessent said he has $1 trillion set aside to make these purchases of 10 to 30-year treasuries. That is such a large amount of money. So there are approximately only 5.5 trillion of treasury bonds dated 10 to 30 years. And I'm sure he's going to focus on the ones that have high coupons and not the ones that have low coupons. What the plan is to bring down the yields on the long end of the yield curve to accelerate some of the sectors that have been lagging, like housing, and support our treasuries, right? And also to support the valuations currently of the stock market. So AI has been building things out and having to, like crazy, right? Having to go to the bond market to finance some of this. So it's been a little sticky, I think, in the treasury market. So this is all really good. So compare this, $1 trillion with what Yellen did. Yellen used 100 billion. He's talking about $1 trillion. That's a big frickin' bazooka, isn't it? So when Yellen did this, okay, roughly end of April to end of September of 2024, the yield on the 10-year Treasury when she started was approximately 4.7%, and then when she ended was approximately 3.7%. So in a very short period of time, it worked beautifully. Now this is not long lasting, but if you put $1 trillion, take $1 trillion and buy back those bonds and move it to the middle part of the Treasury markets, so you lower the interest payments quite a bit. That's going to have a very big impact on that part of the overall market, and that'll allow when the Fed does start to cut rates for those short-term rates to be able to come down in a very big way. So the long-term bonds can come down, and housing could maybe have a really big run here when all this occurs at some point in time. Now, NVIDIA reports on Wednesday the consensus. Okay, the reason why this is important is NVIDIA drives everything. If NVIDIA doesn't work, the tech market likely is not going to work. By working, we mean fundamentally. And it's important that NVIDIA stock also does well. And so they're taking all this cash flow and they're distributing it throughout the ecosystem, basically, to keep things going. We think we're about midway through this spending cycle as companies have to go out and issue debt to finance this rather than issue equity because the equity markets aren't going to support it. But anyhow, NVIDIA reports on Wednesday 91.9 million in revenue is the consensus. The high on the street is 93 billion. Let me say that again. The consensus is 91.9 billion in revenues, and the high on the street is 93 billion. The low is 90.3 billion. Our regression analysis. So we just put, what was reported previously, put the best line through it. Basically, we get 95 billion in revenues. So we think that the street's going to want something close to that, and also a positive outlook. So the outlook is probably the most important thing for the technology sector. Now Marvell has become the hot play. So this will be really interesting on Thursday. Marvell is going to, hopefully they're going to talk about this, but they're going to get a lot of business from Google. So the amount of money that Google has been talking about spending with Marvell is just unbelievable. So we want to get some clarity on that. Now come Friday, it's a busy week. Come Friday, we get the Walsh speech from Jackson Hole. So the Federal Reserve Chairman speaks annually at Jackson Hole. This is where all the central banks get together and discuss policy. So what the market wants to understand is what's the trigger? What is he looking at? So tell us a little bit of detail when you're going to cut rates or when you're going to raise rates. Now, with the inflation numbers that have been reported, we have more this week, but when the inflation numbers reported, the CPI, they were beautiful. I think it took the interest rate increase off the table for September and likely for the rest of the year. So you can see Marvell. Marvell, we bought it really well. I mean, really, really well. Around the $60 area. And then, the stock ran to over $300. Okay, let's pull back. And it hit a number of important moving averages and then back above the 100-day. So if you're a technician, you see it going back above the 100-day, you probably would have bought it. So we think that it's got support down to about $200. If something bad happens in the quarter, knocks the stock down, that's probably a pretty good spot to buy it. We doubt if this will occur though. Precision medicine. So biotechnology is a funny group, isn't it? So you can wait and wait and wait on companies, and then they have some good news that hits, and you get this very big move in a stock. So biotechnology generally doesn't move as a whole. Sometimes it does when interest rates are coming down or people get really excited about the sector. And I think there's good reason for people to be really excited about the sector. But in general, this year, what we saw is a lot of companies having good news and having these massive moves, like Moderna, mRNA. It was $63 before this news came out last week about their vaccine. And then it went as high as $175 per share. Unfortunately, we didn't see this. We didn't pay much attention to that vaccine because we just didn't think there was a high probability of this thing working. But if you remember, Larry Ellison, Sam Altman, the guy from OpenAI, Son from SoftBank, were in the White House. This is back in January with Trump. And Trump said, Larry, you're the genius. Give us an example of how this spending will work in real life. So all this massive spending that SoftBank's going to fund in AI, give us a good example. So Larry went through and said, we believe that there'll be a blood test that will detect cancer early stage and tell you where it is, what type it is, location, And then we think that there will be a personalized drug administered for exactly what that patient needs by using AI. So Moderna has developed this vaccine. We think it's really interesting. We got to see the data though, right? We got to see the data. We haven't seen the data. They just said it's worked. It worked in phase 3. So this vaccine could work on probably any type of cancer, but it needs to be targeted. It needs to be specifically developed for that cancer that you have personally. So it's personalized. So we think it's really an interesting approach. Now Merck has Keytruda, and so Moderna did their trial with Merck's Keytruda to show how the two combined work much better than just Keytruda alone. So Merck is in front of a patent expiration of 28, or excuse me, in 2028 of roughly a $30 billion drug, and so that'll evaporate very quickly. So they need to do something to replace it. So maybe Merck considers to buy Moderna, be a big acquisition at this point, given that stock move, and Grail combined. We think the two of them fit really well together. Now, Grail, we've talked about this quite a bit. This is our way of playing cancer. They report, they have a advisory committee meeting September 23rd, an FDA advisory committee meeting, where we'll vote, and we think that highly likely they're going to vote very positively to get this approved. And if it does occur, we think the stock's going to move up in a big way. So again, what we do in biotechnology is we figure out which stocks we want to buy. We don't buy the whole index. We buy particular names, and that's how we want to outperform over time in a bigger way than the overall index. So if you have any questions, ping me anytime. We're still being a little bit cautious. We have a little bit of hedges in some of our portfolios. We want to be cautious as we go into September, but we think that what's going on at the long end, if it's executed by Bessent, we think could be really positive for the coming months and into 2027. Thank you. Take care.